Hi, Mark Clugwin here for the Photographer Academy, and today we're talking about off-camera flash and we're talking about overpowering the ambient light. When I talk about off-camera flash, this can even be done with kind of the flash on camera if you want the same technique. But today, really, the off-camera flash is where I'm taking the little hot shoe flash off the actual camera itself, trigger it in it either with an external trigger or with a camera to flash communication. Putting that flash either on a stand or resting it somewhere or into a assistant's hands, and basically redirecting the flash. But really what this is about is making sure that we overpower the ambient light that is within the scene. So I kind of chose this image to kind of get us going with, and the reason being it's kind of really easy to explain. A, it was done on a workshop, so I've got to explain it. But B, it really kind of demonstrates the power of dynamic flash, as it were. So if we're looking at the bride model, basically what is lighting her is nothing but flash. So I've put her into the shade of a kind of an alley kind of garage wall, as it were. And what we're seeing though is the bright skies in the top left-hand corner with it. Now, the first thing to do and to guarantee the results is to make sure that we can overpower the ambient light in the scene. So as you can see here, because she's in the shade of the actual garage wall, basically I've taken the exposure from the clouds and the kind of the sunlight sky, as it were. That's my working shutter speed, aperture and ISO. So that's my perfect exposure. Any light that is falling onto my subject is basically the ambient light that is left. So this is more like an underexposed image of the girl against the garage wall. Now, don't forget, if I want to actually just use the ambient light, I could do that. All I would need to do then is obviously re-expose for the correct working exposure based on the shaded light that she is in. But I'm not planning to actually do that. What I'm trying to achieve is dynamic light. Okay, so in studio flash, when you're working inside, basically you're usually in a darkened room, so any flash that you add onto a subject is going to kind of light them. It's going to control the kind of where you want your subjects kind of to pop off the page, as it were. Here, by taking a manual through the camera reading of the sky and setting that as my exposure, then basically setting the flash to kind of mimic that exposure, or in fact, if I want even a darker sky, to make the ambient sky one stop less exposed than what I want to actually expose for. I'll kind of give you some numbers now in a minute, okay? But when I add in the flash here, what this is now doing is creating the dynamic, and all we've got is a little kind of light speedlight flash on a kind of a hand or a pole, or whatever you can get it in the right place with, and basically it's directed onto the subject, and that is our working exposure. So by doing that, basically what we've now got is all the light onto the girl. Any other spill light is basically just giving some illumination, but we've got this real domination of the actual sky in the background. So let's say the exposure for the sky is 125th of a second at f16. What I now need to do is basically set that on camera as my working manual exposure. And then what I need to do is set the flash in either manual power and meter it to match that working exposure, or put the flash into a TTL mode, so it basically will actually kind of make sure it corrects the exposure based on my TTL reading as such. Okay, so that's through the lens metering. That's really what we're trying to achieve. I usually work in manual mode because I guarantee the results. So in exactly the same way, this is how all of these images would be set up. I would expose for the sky, then I would basically either set my flash to match that exposure, or if I wanted a darker sky, I would overpower the flash by one stop. So let's say again, it's 125th of a second at f11. In this case, I would set the flash to give me a working exposure of f16. That's one stop more. And then on camera, I would need to actually change my working aperture to f16 to overpower the flash more. Now, when you're working against darker backgrounds, you can work with much more kind of less flash light because you've kind of working in a darker environment. So really what I'm doing here is making sure that I'm exposing for the brightness of the leaf behind her. Then I move in my manual flash off camera to actually give me this beautiful profile lighting of the bride and things. Exactly the same thing as the first shot, in fact. We're metering for the highlight within the sky, and then we're basically setting the flash to match that exposure. And remember, you know, it's the same working technique all the time, no matter what you're doing. Basically, we're trying to expose for either to get the perfect exposure of the sky and then put our flash onto the subject to mimic that light and as if the sun's falling on her in the same way, or we're trying to make the sky even darker, as you can see here by the rainbow sky, where we've overpowered the lighting onto the subject, and basically we're making the background even darker again. So some flashes will allow you to work in a very, very high shutter speed, but basically a normal on-camera flash setting where you have to have your shutter speed at 200th of a second or below. Which means that if you want to shoot on the likes of f4, f5.6, let's say, and you're working outside on a very, very sunny day, you won't be able to achieve that exposure because basically you might have to be at 1600th of a second or whatever it is. And by that point, the flash isn't going to have enough time to record its burst of flash in the same time as the camera shutter is open to kind of record it. And basically, not to get too technical, there's the kind of a burst of the flash which is to do with the curvature of the explosion of the gas and how it kind of will then actually light the subject. This is why if we need to work in very high shutter speeds, we're going to set the flash into a fast sync mode, and that will allow us pretty much to use any shutter speed. The only thing that we've got to remember, of course, is that when we're working with very, very fast shutter speeds, we're not going to see the whole explosion of the flash itself. And that's it. No excuse for you not to get going with some off-camera flash work and overpowering the ambient light with your little Speedlight flash. Good luck.